Today, we're going to have a training session on what to do in an active shooter scenario. To start, we're going to watch a quick video that's going to illustrate my first point. And the first point in these active shooter scenario preparation plans is that hoping that this kind of thing won't happen to you is not an option. Hope is not a plan of action that will protect you. To illustrate that, we're going to watch a quick video that took place in Houston last year.
Today, this time in Texas, a fired worker returning armed, showing up at the factory right across the street from a high school. SWAT teams rushing to the scene, but not in time to stop the man from killing one employee and then himself. ABC's Clayton Sandell tonight on what the gunman shouted and who he targeted.
Police say today at this Texas trucking company, a disgruntled former employee came back for revenge. The shooter drove his white pickup truck to the entrance at 8:43 this morning, armed with a handgun and shotgun, through the front window, then going inside.
One individual I spoke with, he did pass him and continued through the building as though he was looking particularly for somebody.
The gunman, who investigators say was fired from his job here 2 weeks ago, shot and killed a supervisor. KTRK-TV reports his name is Michael Dowd.
One of the employees stated that he said, "Y'all ruined my life."
Officers arrived at 8:47, but by then, the shooter had killed himself. On average, workplace shootings kill about one person every day in the U.S. In 5 years, more than 1,700 people were shot dead where they worked.
And David, a chaplain brought in to counsel some of the employees here, tells us that workers were diving for cover as bullets and glass went flying. 2 of them were injured by shrapnel but are expected to be okay. Tonight, the company says all operations here for now are suspended. David, Clayton, thank you.
Now, as you can see from that video, which took place in the city that we all live and work in just a year ago, this is an unfortunate reality that we have to be prepared for. And that's why today's training is so important. And I firmly ask for your undivided attention during this session. We're going to jump down actually first to the OSHA guidelines regarding our duty as a company to prepare you for what to do in this sort of situation. Now, OSHA guidelines section 5A1 is a general clause that says that we as your employer have a duty to protect our employees from harm. And in recent court cases following workplace shootings, the courts have actually held that it is negligent for us to not prepare you for a workplace shooting scenario because of the prevalence of this issue and the fact that it is a reality that we face. Just some brief statistics to relay the gravity of the situation. According to the FBI, between 2000 and 2015, there were at least 200 active shooter incidents in the United States. 45% of these incidents took place in a place of business, and almost 600 people were killed and almost 700 people were injured. These numbers aren't going down. They are continuing to climb on average every year, and the number of fatalities every year continues to increase as well. Now, we'll go over a brief overview of what we're going to talk about in the session today. The first thing we're going to describe are your options in an active shooter scenario. These are provided by the Department of Homeland Security and their active shooter prevention training, and they are run, hide, and fight. The first thing that we want to remember with these 3 options is that it's not a progression of steps that you can expect to take place in an active shooter scenario. These are individual options that you have, and there's a very good chance that you won't employ 2 or 3 of them. It's our job as a company to prepare you for this situation, but in this situation, you have to take those 3 options and what you've learned and analyze what's going on, and you have to decide whether you're going to run, hide, and fight. And you also have to bear in mind when making this decision that your only goal, if there is an active shooter at your workplace, is to preserve your own life. After we go over those options, we're going to talk about what to do when law enforcement arrives. Then we'll talk about preparedness and our company's action plan and prevention so that we can hopefully make sure that this sort of event doesn't occur here. Now, the first option in an active shooter scenario is to run. According to the Department of Homeland Security, running is the best option when you're a safe distance from the shooter. If you can hear the shooter and generally know his location, but you can't see him and you're confident that escaping wouldn't allow him to see you either, running is a good option. Before you run, you need to have an escape route in mind. You don't want to be wandering through the hallways, wondering where you're going to go or turn or hide. You need to run with a purpose and run quickly. Now, you also would like to assist others when you're running, but if someone refuses to leave or if someone who is injured is unable to leave, you cannot stay with them, and it is not advised to try to move someone who has been injured. When emergency medical services arrive, they will do this professionally. Once you have escaped and once you are safe, that is the time where it is recommended that you call 911. Not before you run, not while you're running, only when you are safe. Now, the second option we're going to review is hiding. Hiding is the best option if you can hear gunshots, but you don't know where they're coming from, and you don't have an escape route in mind. It might be in your best interest to hide. There's several things that we want to consider when we're hiding. The first thing is that you're going to want to turn off the lights and make it appear as though the room or office you're in is vacant and make it difficult for a shooter to find you. You want to lock doors, and if they're not able to be locked, barricade them with anything you can. Desks, chairs, bookcases, filing cabinets, anything that will distance yourself from the active shooter. When you do hide, you want to stay away from the view of windows and away from doors that may have windows in them. And the LA County Sheriff's Department recommends using two things: cover and concealment. Cover means putting something between yourself and an active shooter that would stop a bullet. And concealment means something that will keep you out of the active shooter's sight. Once you are hiding, you want to silence your cell phone. Vibrations, ringtones, or any noise from your cell phone could alert an active shooter to where you are hiding. And finally, do not shout for help while you are hiding. This would completely eliminate all of the effort you would put in to find a safe place if you're then shouting out and alerting the shooter to where you are. Finally, we're going to talk about the option to fight. And fighting is an absolute last resort. If you remember, we talked about the ultimate goal for you as an individual if you're ever in an active shooter scenario, and your goal is solely to stay alive. So you're not going to fight to protect someone else. You're not going to fight for any reason unless it is the only option that it will save your life. If you are put in a position where you are forced to fight an active shooter, you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to incapacitate the shooter. You want to fight with your life because that is what you're fighting for. Use the sharpest and heaviest tools around you that are available, even if it's not something that's necessarily obvious. If you have heavy books, binders with rings that you can open, a telephone, and a fire extinguisher is a great example recommended by the Department of Homeland Security because it could both be used to be sprayed and blind the attacker as well as to hit him and incapacitate him. And the final thing with fighting is that in no circumstances do you want to attempt to reason with the shooter. This is shown to be completely ineffective in active shooter scenarios and will only put yourself at greater risk. Now, once you have escaped and once you are safe and you are calling 911, your primary goal is to stay calm and to relay as much information as possible. A common mistake that is made in situations of crisis is that people may assume that someone else would have already called 911. It is important not to make that assumption. If you call 911 and they've already been informed of the situation and they don't need a lot of information from you, they will let you know that. But there is a good chance that you have seen, heard, or know something that another caller wasn't able to relay that could help first responders neutralize the threat. Some specific things you want to make note of if you ever find yourself in this situation to give to law enforcement is the location of the active threat. If you're on a multi-building campus, what building it is, what floor it is, and where the active shooter has already been in the building. The number of assailants is also important. Any physical description like height, weight, hair color, clothing that you can give of the assailant. The number and type of weapons, which will help law enforcement prepare to address the threat, and the number of potential victims that the assailant has already taken. Finally, when police arrive, and this is another time where it's of the utmost importance that you stay calm. Immediately when law enforcement arrive, you want to put down anything in your hands. Whether or not you think it appears to be a threat, you need to put it down so that law enforcement can easily distinguish between you and a potential threat. You want to keep your hands raised and your fingers spread at all times, not only when you initially encounter law enforcement, but the entire time that you are around them. You don't want to run or charge toward law enforcement. It is important that you stand still, raise your hands, and then following directions. Do not ask first responders for questions because first responders arrive on the scene with the sole intention of neutralizing the threat. Later on, people will come who will help the injured or give you more direction, but the first responders' only goal is to neutralize the threat, and it is your job to be compliant and make their job easier. So follow their instructions directly. Don't ask questions. Avoid pointing, screaming, or yelling, and as we discussed, don't expect the first responders to aid those who are injured. Finally, we're going to talk about an action plan. It is important when you all go back to your offices today that you consider the information you've learned here and that the 3 options you would be presented with in an active shooter scenario. You want to be familiar with all escape routes and exits. You want to be aware of what areas in your workplace have visibility and would be a poor spot to hide. You want to have potential hiding places in mind, maybe a closet or under a desk. And you want to know which objects around you would make the best potential weapons if you were forced to fight. Next, we're going to go over our personal office escape plan.
Thank you.
Now, as you can see, based on where we are in the Fred Frey Computing Services Center, there are 2 different stairwell exits that we would use in the case of an emergency like this. If you're located in offices 321 through 347, you're going to proceed to the south stair exit. And if you're in offices 307 to 320 or 349 to 359, you're going to proceed to the northwest stairs. If you happen to be working in an electrical or mechanical area anywhere on this floor during an active shooter scenario, you're going to proceed to the northwest stairs, unless your best option is to hide, because there are plenty of spaces that I'm sure you're all familiar with given your work in those areas that would potentially make good hiding spaces. Before I move on, does anyone have any specific questions on the escape route plan? We all understand? And everyone know what stairwell they would go to?
Yes. And it's better to use the stairs because we don't want to cause like a group of people waiting at the elevator, right?
Correct, yes. So if you were to proceed to the elevator, you don't know how many people on different levels are trying to escape and how many stops it would take you to get down. You are not sure if there are multiple assailants and if stopping at a different floor could also put you directly in harm's way. It would be your best option to proceed to a stairwell in this sort of scenario. Thank you, Hamish, for that question.
So, I have a question.
Yeah.
So if I'm in one of these conference rooms and there's a shooter, it's my duty and job to assess whether I need to hide or run. It's not just run all the time. Sometimes I should maybe hide depending on.
Correct, yes. So based on the things that we discussed earlier, It would probably be a better option to run in a conference room if you knew, for example, that a shooter was in the electrical or mechanical areas, because you would know that you had a safe distance from them. If you're in like 320 there in the center in the conference room and there's an active shooter in the room, it would probably be your best option to hide. But that's the same sort of situation we just talked about earlier, where you have to take the information you learned today and analyze the situation if you're ever in it to decide which course of action is best. Finally, we're going to talk about prevention and workplace vigilance. It's important to always be aware of your surroundings at work. When people have significant stressors or changes in life, that may be an indication, coupled with a change in their behavior, that they would be thinking about workplace violence. So around times of layoffs or significant stress, or if pay cuts are present in the office ever, that might be a time where you want to be more in tune to how your coworkers are thinking and feeling. If something or someone appears unusual or safe at any time in the office, it's okay to report them. Even if it's a false alarm, we would much rather handle a false alarm than an active shooter scenario. In a recent U.S. Secret Service report released, it was revealed that in nearly 2/3 of active shooter attacks, more than one person knew about the event before it was going to happen, whether this was a face-to-face communication, a text message, or a social media post. If you hear something, say something, because that could be the difference between a situation where your coworkers or your friends die and a situation where everyone is safe. Also, effective immediately, our company will be starting evacuation drills with the maps planned, and you guys can each keep those at your desk. They're also posted in the hallways that we will do semi-annually to practice what to do in this sort of situation, in addition to our normal fire safety drills. Finally, we're going to have a bit of review, a quick open-ended quiz, no pressure, no grades, no prizes, sorry. First off, does anyone know what the primary mission of the first responder at the scene of an active shooter attack is?
To neutralize the shooter.
To neutralize the shooter, excellent. And when is the fight response most appropriate? Dennis?
When all other options are not possible.
Perfect. Brian, did you have anything to add to that?
That's it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
What kind of information should you give on a 911 call during an active shooter scenario? Con, do you remember anything?
I do, yes. Number of attackers, if they have any weapons, whereabouts they might be,
Perfect.
where the situation's occurring. If there's anyone, I mean, I would do this if anyone was actually dead next to me. How many injuries, how many casualties? Probably the address of the location where you are is a good idea. Yeah, I mean,
The
those
shooter's physical appearance.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that was the fifth
Yeah.
one.
Okay, yeah.
Excellent.
Who the person is.
And then lastly, true or false? Trying to reason with the shooter is a recommended response. Floor?
No.
False. Excellent. All right, now before we finish up, I'm going to hand out a little sort of pocket desk card for each of you to keep with you. This just reviews the run, hide, fight options that you have.
Is it for us to keep?
Yeah, at your desk. And before we finish up, does anyone have any questions on anything we learned today?
I have a more general question, and that's because probably I've only been in the U.S. for 6 months, but
So they teach this at the workplace.
Yes.
Is this being taught at schools as well and colleges and universities, these types of active shooter situations?
Yes, as far as I know, this is something that is being taught pretty universally now at places of employment and places where large groups congregate on a regular basis. I know in elementary schools, I don't know if they call it an active shooter drill.
Yeah.
They call it more of like a crisis drill or a lockdown drill.
All right.
And
I think another thing I would add is that if you find yourself in a hide situation, something I've been told before, if you end up hiding in a bathroom, to make sure that you stand on top of the toilet and crouch down so that they don't see feet underneath or head above. That's something they
That's
actually
excellent
are
advice.
telling children.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions?
Should you ring the fire alarm as well to help make a distraction of noise or?
So that's something that I actually looked into while preparing this training session. The Department of Homeland Security, which issues a wealth of information on how to address active shooter trainings, is actually pretty silent on the issue. And after independent review of different sheriff's offices, like the LA County, and then an office in New Jersey as well, I found that there were somewhat mixed reviews. Some people think that it may be a good option to startle a shooter, but it also would be difficult if you heard someone shouting for help or if law enforcement was trying to communicate, and it may make the shooter panic and actually attack with more urgency than he would have before. So I would say at our place of employment, due to the fact that there's no official recommendation, we would recommend that unless there's a fire, you don't pull the fire alarm.
Okay.
Great. Well, if there are no further questions, we'll wrap that up. Thank you all for your time today and for your